There are, it is true, other things in religion chronologically more primordial than personal devoutness in the moral sense. Fetishism and magic seem to have preceded inward piety historically. At least our records of inward piety do not reach back so far. And if fetishism and magic be regarded as stages of religion, one may say that personal religion in the inward sense and the genuinely spiritual ecclesiasticisms which it founds are phenomena of secondary or even tertiary order. But quite apart from the fact that many anthropologists, for instance Jevons and Fraser, expressly oppose religion and magic to each other, it is certain that the whole system of thought which leads to magic, fetishism, and the lower superstitions may just as well be called primitive science as called primitive religion. The question thus becomes a verbal one again, and our knowledge of all these early stages of thought and feelings is in any case so conjectural and imperfect that further discussion would not be worthwhile. Religion, therefore, as I now ask you arbitrarily to take it, shall mean for us the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude, so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider divine. Since the relation may be either moral, physical, or ritual, it is evident that out of religion, in the sense in which we take it, theologies, philosophies, and ecclesiastical organizations may secondarily grow. In these lectures, however, as I have already said, the immediate personal experiences will amply fill our time, and we shall hardly consider theology or ecclesiasticism at all. We escape much controversial matter by this arbitrary definition of our field. But still, a chance of controversy comes up over the word divine, if we take the definition in too narrow a sense. There are systems of thought which the world usually calls religious, and yet which do not positively assume a god. Buddhism is in this case. Popularly, of course, the Buddha himself stands in place of a god, but in strictness, the Buddhistic system is atheistic. Modern transcendental idealism, Emersonianism, for instance, also seems to let God evaporate into abstract ideality. Not a deity in concreto, not a superhuman person, but the immanent divinity in things. The essentially spiritual structure of the universe is the object of the transcendentalist cult. In that address to the graduating class at Divinity College in 1838, which made Emerson famous, the frank expression of this worship of mere abstract laws was what made the scandal of the performance. These laws, said the speaker, execute themselves. They are out of time, out of space, and not subject to circumstance. Thus, in the soul of man, there is a justice whose retributions are instant and entire. He who does a good deed is instantly ennobled. He who does a mean deed is, by the action itself, contracted. He who puts off impurity thereby puts on purity. If a man is at heart just, then insofar is he God, the safety of God, the immortality of God, the majesty of God, do enter into that man with justice. If a man deceive, he deceives himself and goes out of acquaintance with his own being. Character is always known. Thefts never enrich. Alms never impoverish. Murders will speak out of stone walls. The least admixture of a lie, for example, the taint of vanity, any attempt to make a good impression, a favorable appearance, will instantly vitiate the effect. But speak the truth, and all things alive or brute are vouchers, and the very roots of your grass underground there do seem to stir and move, to bear your witness. For all things proceed out of the same Spirit, which is differently named love, justice, temperance, in its different applications, just as the ocean receives different names on the several shores which it washes. Insofar as he roves from these ends, a man bereaves himself of power, of auxiliaries. His being shrinks. He becomes less and less a mote, a point, until absolute badness is absolute death. The perception of this law awakens in the mind a sentiment which we call the religious sentiment, and which makes our highest happiness. Wonderful is its power to charm and to command. It is a mountain air. It is the embalmer of the world. It makes the sky and the hills sublime, and the silent song of the stars is it. It is the beatitude of man. It makes him illimitable. When he says, I ought, when love warns him, when he chooses, warned from on high, the good and great deed, then deep melodies wander through his soul from supreme wisdom. Then he can worship and be enlarged by his worship, for he can never go behind this sentiment. All the expressions of this sentiment are sacred and permanent in proportion to their purity. They affect us more than all other compositions. The sentences of the olden time which ejaculate this piety are still fresh and fragrant, and the unique impression of Jesus upon mankind, whose name is not so much written as plowed into history of this world, is proof of the subtle virtue of this infusion. Such is the Emersonian religion. The universe has a divine soul of order, which soul is moral, being also the soul within the soul of a man. But whether this soul of the universe be a mere quality like the eye's brilliancy or the skin's softness, or whether it be a self-conscious life like the eye's seeing or the skin's feeling, is a decision that never unmistakably appears in Emerson's pages. It quivers on the boundary of these things, sometimes leaning one way, sometimes the other, to suit the literary rather than the philosophic need. Whatever it is, though, it is active. As much as if it were a god, we can trust it to protect all ideal interests and keep the world's balance straight. The sentences in which Emerson, to the very end, gave utterance to this faith are as fine as anything in literature. If you love and serve men, you cannot by any hiding or stratagem escape the remuneration. Secret retributions are always restoring the level, when disturbed, of the divine justice. It is impossible to tilt the beam. All the tyrants and proprietors and monopolists of the world in vain set their shoulders to heave the bar. Settles forevermore the ponderous equator to its line, and man and mote and star and sun must range to it, or be pulverized by the recoil. Now, it would be too absurd to say that the inner experiences that underlie such expressions of faith as this and impel the writer to their utterance are quite unworthy to be called religious experiences. The sort of appeal that Emersonian optimism on the one hand and Buddhistic pessimism on the other make to the individual, and the sort of response which he makes to them in his life, are in fact indistinguishable from, and in many respects identical with, the best Christian appeal and response. We must therefore, from the experiential point of view, call these godless or quasi-godless creeds religions. And accordingly, when in our definition of religion we speak of the individual's relation to what he considers divine, we must interpret the term divine very broadly, as denoting any object that is God-like, whether it be a concrete deity or not. But the term godlike, if thus treated as a floating general quality, becomes exceedingly vague, for many gods have flourished in religious history, and their attributes have been discrepant enough. What then is that essentially godlike quality, be it embodied in a concrete deity or not, our relation to which determines our character as religious men? It will repay us to seek some answer to this question before we proceed farther.